There's a rule for that? Are you sure? Are you sure there's a rule for that? Huh. Gotta look this. Yeah, there's a freaking rule for that. Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Today I want to talk about rules as written and my commitment to trying to experience some games, as they were intended to be played, and what that's like as I'm kind of shifting a mindset. If you watch my channel, it's no surprise that I'm a guy that kind of grew up tweaking and house ruling games because that's what we were encouraged to do. I started playing, games that really didn't have a heck of a lot of rules. They covered some situations. There were some resolution mechanics, but a lot of it was just wide open and open to interpretation. And so we were encouraged to fly by the seat of our pants, and so we learned to do that. And I've been used to playing games like that, for a long, long time. So this is kind of a different experience for me. If you've also followed the channel lately, you know that I'm playing this all-for-one Regime Diabolique game with Runeslinger and with No Inquisitor and with JDRD30. So as I'm playing with Anthony and Sebastian and Francois, those are their real names. It's different because we kind of have this. I don't want to say a social contract, but I guess that's what it is. I've kind of made this decision to look at the rules, see what they really say. In these Ubiquity-based games, because I'm really kind of getting into that system anyway, but trying to get into some more of the nuances. And so I've made a commitment, at least to myself, to abide by them, not just as an agreement, amongst ourselves to play the game, rules as written, but also for my own edification, to kind of experience the game as it was intended by the designers. And kind of, bump my head here and there, which I have. And we've been having discussions off and on about how the system works in various situations. We talked about what our intentions or ideas are, outside of the system. Like, what do we want to do? What kind of characters or adventures or hooks or items or whatnot, we want to introduce, our, outside the rules kind of thing. But how all that fits together, how do the rules fit together and our ideas. And just that video I made a couple days ago about taunting. And what the mechanics might be for that. Ask some questions. Actually, in the comment section of that video, Runeslinger answered some of my questions. But we've been having discussions like that, and that was a very public one. But we've had a lot more where it's just been in Facebook Messenger and on our private Facebook group. We've been planning on having some hangout sessions, like some private hangout sessions, to just kind of talk over some of the rules, nuances, and what have you. And how we play the game, how we implement all these nuances. Of the system, that's been an ongoing conversation. But my overall intention is to operate as much as I can within the guidelines and the rules as written, which can be a challenge for a person like me. Because as you look at this particular game, this applies to whatever game you're going to play. But as you look at this particular game, there's things like resources and talismans, which might be like magic items. Things like a refuge, like where you live, your status in various groups, things like weird science inventions, like maybe you create something in a game like where you go, Leagues of Adventure. You can have these weird science inventions. Your contacts, social contacts, whether it's an ally, whether it's a patron, whether it's a follower, all these things. With all those resources, for lack of a better word, but that's what they're called in these games, it's really tempting to kind of hand wave and use kind of common sense and just say, okay, well, you get this talisman here, you meet this person. It's tempting to kind of hand wave the rules and use some common sense rather than abiding by the rules of the system. And the rules of the system are, I don't think they apply to every single person you meet and every single item you'd find and whatnot, but there are some codified rules in here, and where you actually spend experience in order to solidify relationships or to gain items or to gain status within an organization and what have you. It's not just kind of a hand wave thing. And actually, this is one of these situations where I know I've talked to Anthony a little bit about some of those things like talismans and whatnot, and he said he was planning to make a video on this. This is kind of like gentle prod. You should make a video about this, because these are things where the system can get, I don't want to say confusing, but you can use a little bit more direction and whatnot, because it can be a little bit daunting the first time, because it's a little bit different than what you'd normally think, or how some games might handle it. Let's see, what else was I going to say that was going to be really exciting? There's mechanical parameters in terms of what a resource costs. And there's mechanical parameters in terms of how they work. And we had this discussion about this talisman that Anthony was able to pick up, because that's what it really was. It's kind of a magic item. And we were discussing, Sebastian gave us the properties of said item. But now we're sitting there and trying to figure out, well, how does this really work in terms of game terms? And we came up with, I think, like 4 different ideas, and I think mine actually won. I think I might have had the best idea. But it is codified. So it's a little bit different than like flying by the seat of your pants. Because a person like me, I'm used to just kind of saying this is what this does, and we'll make it up. And if we have to make up rules outside the rules, that's fine. Let's go. But there's rules to be followed. And I don't want to break rules as written, this early into the game experience. Even something like the bestiary in All for One is codified and it follows a theme. There's things like vampires and werewolves and ghouls and all the kind of monsters you would think of. However, they follow this theme. They have specific roles as tools of Satan in this game. I don't want to give too much away and be too many spoilers if you're interested in the game. But the various monsters are, they have involvement with spirits that represent like cardinal sins. It really has this kind of flavor to it. And so, yeah, you can tweak them and mess around a little bit, but there is a formula or a vibe that it's really going for. And so, as I'm preparing to run something, I want to make sure that I don't mess with that and stay within the rules itself. Likewise, Ubiquity, the Ubiquity game itself has a codified system to stat out things like people and monsters and what have you. Whatever creature it is, there's a way to kind of stat them out correctly. And it's kind of weird because as you look at them, look at the amount of health and defense they have. It doesn't get as big, the bigger and more, bigger and badder things get. There's not that huge power spread numbers-wise that somebody like me would be used to in playing, like, say, old school Dungeons and Dragons or something, where things become incredibly powerful, and you can look at the number and realize, oh, wow. Once again, these are things that, there's a little bit more nuance that I still haven't completely wrapped my head around. And this is the other topic I think, Anthony ought to make a video on, so prod number 2. Because we did have this discussion about how stuff like that works, and he talked about it's important, like how you play and represent creatures and whatnot, and kind of just backing off just the stats, so once again, I think he ought to make a video on that. But these are things, once again, there's a codified way to do it. There are some rules as written, and it's funny as we talk about these various rules. At least I've talked more about the Ubiquity rules, with him than I have, and with Anthony than I have with the other two. But it's funny because Anthony is the guy that's like full of this depth and nuance, and I'm kind of like this blunt instrument. Like, okay, this is the best way to handle the situation. Boom, let's go. What do you mean? There's another way to do it? It's funny, and I'm not sure why that we're different. I think it might boil down to a little nature versus nurture sort of thing. I think we have different natures in terms of how we approach things. I think the four of us really do when it comes right down to it. It's funny to see the four of us discussing things and see just little nuances here and there. But I think it also could be what kind of games we were exposed to. And it's funny, Francois and I kind of share this kind of like old school sensibility, although Francois came from a very different standpoint. And then when you watch the videos of how the four of us got into gaming, and it starts to make sense, that the type of games we played or gravitated towards or found out to be our favorites really kind of informed how we approach the games, playing games now. And it can be kind of interesting to see as we kind of grind our gears against each other a little bit and kind of, figure out how we're all going to fit and make it mesh. And, it's cool to be able to have discussions and I want to call them conflicts, but they're slight conflicts, and be able to kind of work our way through them, amicably. And, they're not big deals. It's just a matter of like we need to sit down occasionally and, hash out how are we going to handle this. But how are we going to do this, once again, in terms of like, how does the system really work? So for me, this has been a little rambly, but it's been a different mindset because I'm used to starting out with an idea, an intention, an effect, a concept, and making it work. Coming up with something outside the rules to make it work if need be. Because in like something like old school games, like OSR games, that's been my usual MO, and that tends to be the MO. Okay, make it work. And here, to stay within the rules as written, it seems that I need to be conscious of the system. And very early in my intention process, do I want to create a magic item or a monster or come up with an idea or a creature or a scenario? Really early in this intention process, for lack of a better word, I need to take a look at the system, remain conscious of it, and let the parameters of the system, whatever it is, whether it's Ubiquity or some other game, inform me like what is and isn't possible, and like before I get too sold on what I want the final effect or outcome to be, just kind of create it, co-create it with the rules and make sure that I don't get way off base. And sometimes that means I might need to adjust things a little bit. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting journey, or has been an interesting journey, as I learn to operate, within the rules as written of this particular game, and I imagine of other games as well, because it is kind of my first nature or first instinct to go ahead and house rule things a little bit, or just kind of use a little hand waving. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to use that, or I'm not going to use this. I really want to do this instead. But I think I owe it to the other people playing the game and to myself to experience things, rules as written, even if it means that I have to kind of adjust course. So, what has your experience with things like this been? Do you have a different take entirely, or is this something that makes sense to you? Is this something that you've always done and always been rules as written, or is this during your journey have you kind of gone from being more freeform, devil may care, the heck with it, to being more rules as written? Have you gone the opposite way? I'd like to hear your experience.